Hello there. In this video I'm going to show you how you can make your own 3D printable tea light holder using Fluid Designer for 3D printing. So similar to the one that's on the screen there, albeit that's quite a complicated one to actually recreate. Here's another example of one that's actually printed in plastic. So this is an example of a tea light holder which you can create. And this has been printed at Shapeways using their layer sintering process. So what do we need to do? Well, if we go to Fluid Designer for 3D printing, which you can download free from the internet, if you go to the library and select tableware, you will find, even with the free version, that you'll get a couple of the files available free of charge. This tea light holder here and the master that's used to make it, and this is actually the one that's on the opening screenshot. So if you just drag and drop that object onto the workspace, this is the tea light holder that you saw in the opening screenshot there, this one. And as it stands at the moment, this object isn't 3D printable. If you read the information in the help panel in the bottom left hand corner there, it tells you to run it through NetFab and to do Alt-S, and Alt-S thickens it up, and I'll show you that feature later. And this object at the moment has not got the modifiers applied, and we like to leave the modifiers in place so you can actually see what it is that you're doing and how the object's being created, and you can actually change this object. So if I change the decimate ratio here, you can see that I can change the appearance of the tea light holder, and I could print a completely different tea light holder there, or reasonably different I should say. Okay, so how do we actually do this? Well, the master for this is actually available free with Fluid Designer for 3D printing, and if you just drag and drop that object onto the workspace, what you've got there is the blue line at the side there is a profile curve, and that profile curve is creating the shape, the outline shape of the finished, or almost finished I should say, tea light holder. Now you do need to apply thickness to this, because at the moment this is actually just a shell, but what you can see from here is how the object can be reshaped, restyled by changing the profile curve. Now the white bit at the top there is to simulate the actual tea light candle and the size of it that you need to place in the middle of this for it to actually work in real life. You do need to know what your tea light is going to be there. Okay, so how can we create this from scratch in Fluid Designer? Well, if you just go to File and New, if you go to 3D templates cross sections, and these files are available in the free version, I'm going to use the circular cross section, and if you just drag and drop that object onto the workspace, essentially what you've got here is you've got a profile curve along the left hand side here, and as you move control points on that profile curve, it will change the main body of the object. So the profile curve is actually a Bezier curve, and the main body of the object is also a Bezier curve, and the profile curve controls it. Now at the moment the main body of this object has actually got a modifier applied to it, a solidify modifier of 3 millimeters. I'm going to actually delete that for the moment and just take it back to the raw shell. So if we just view this from the front, and I'll just switch on screencast keys so any key presses I make should be displayed down here. And if I click on the profile curve on the left hand side there, to go into edit mode I need to press the tab key on the keyboard. And in edit mode I can change the shape of this, as you can see. And at the moment there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 control points that I can adjust to change the shape of the profile shape of this object. And we are going to need to add a few more of those. So if I come back out of edit mode there by pressing the tab key on the keyboard, Because we're making a T-light holder here, we do need to place a T-light or an object to simulate the T-light into our workspace so that we can work around it. And I'm going to do that by going to Add, Mesh, and I'm going to add a cylinder. And the object has gone in the middle here, and if I just pull it up, you can see it's quite small at the moment. We need to resize this object to the real size of the T-light that you're going to use. Now I'm going to size it to 38 millimeters by 38 millimeters, so in other words it's a round T-light, and 38 millimeters in diameter, and 16 millimeters is the height that I'm going to work to. Now not all T-light candles are the same, so you do need to actually measure the one that you want to use. So if I just go to view and front again, and if I just pull that object down a bit, I can't see it now obviously, but if I actually just go to material and wireframe mode, you can see in yellow where the candle is, the T-light's going to be. So I need to work around that. So I need to wrap my outer body around that so that it will still fit inside when the real thing is printed. So if I click on the profile curve there and press the tab key to go into edit mode, and I need to zoom in now until I've got millimeters displayed here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to move that point across. Now I don't want to get too close to the side of the T-light itself. I need some gap here, so I'm going to leave about 4 millimeters, and I'm just going to pull that point down and I'm going to pull it across, because obviously I'm going to need a bottom on the inside here so that the T-light candle can sit on. So if I just go to view and front again, so if I move my second control point and position it somewhere like there, we can play around with these in a second and reposition them, and move my third point up now, and pull it back out again. So I'm leaving myself a gap here of about 4 millimeters. Because I want to make sure, if I just switch this back to material mode, you can see better. I want to make sure I've got a reasonable clearance on the inside there, because I need to apply some thickness to this outer object as well. So probably give yourself at least 4 millimeters, 3 or 4 millimeters thickness there. It does depend upon what thickness you apply to the shell. Okay, so if I just view that from the front, so I could now move these control points and change the profile until I've got a shape that I'm happy with. What I need to be clear of is that I've got a reasonable height down here for my candle to sit in, which I think I have, and I'm just going to leave it at that shape now. Actually reproducing this one is quite a bit more complicated than this because of the way that we add thickness to the object. So I'm going to stick with the simple one that should work when you create this. So once you're happy with that profile, you need to come out of edit mode by pressing the tab key on the keyboard, and this object itself here now is still a curve. We need to change this to a mesh at this point, but don't do that until you're absolutely happy with the profile, which I am. So I'm going to change that to a mesh. Now what that means is that my profile curve on the side, if I select that again and go into edit mode, if I move it now, it has no effect on the main body anymore. It's not connected. Once we've changed this main body to a mesh, it's not controlled by the profile curve anymore, so I can delete that by highlighting it and pressing X on the keyboard and deleting it. Now what I need to do, this is a shell, I need to add some thickness to it. But before I add any thickness to it, I need to select modifiers in the properties panel here, and I'll just open this up a little bit. I need to use a decimate modifier first of all, because this object has got 4,600 faces to it. I need to reduce that down to a few hundred really. What do I mean by that? Well, if I go to wireframe mode there, you can see there are the 4,600. If I hold down the left mouse button and drag the mouse, you can see the face count is coming down. It's down to 1,000 now, with a decimate ratio of about 0.1. So I'm actually going to type in 0.1 there. You do need this down in the hundreds. Now, to control this a little bit more, I'm actually going to add a second decimate modifier. Sometimes you need to do this, sometimes you don't. It just depends what your face count is to start with. So you can see I've got more detailed control over the object now here. So I'll bring that down to a few hundred. Alright, now this object is not a wireframe at the moment. It is actually a solid object like that, and you can still see the clearance in here, which we're going to need to ensure that when we print this we will be able to fit a candle in. So we've applied a couple of decimate modifiers. What we want to do now is to make it into a wireframe. So I'm going to apply a wireframe modifier. And now we truly do have a wireframe. We're not in wireframe mode up here. We're still in material mode, but we have got a wireframe now. And there are some values that we need to set in here, and I'm actually going to tick all of these boxes here. I'm going to make sure my offset is 0. Now what that means is that anything that's material that's added to here will be added on the inside and the outside of the object evenly. And I'm actually also going to tick crease edges, and I'm going to set this crease weight down to 0. So those are some of the settings I need to make there. Now I need to add some body to this wireframe. This is far too thin to print, to 3D print. So we're now going to add a solidify modifier. And the solidifier modifier at the moment has not got very much thickness. So I'm going to change it to 1, 2, I'm going to switch it up to 3 millimeters, I think. No, probably I need to switch it back down to 2 millimeters to ensure I've still got some clearance there. It depends on exactly how you've sized that originally. But it also depends on this offset value here. Again, I'm going to click in there and I'm going to set that to 0 offset, like my thickness for the wireframe here. And that has actually given me a bit more clearance there, so I might be able to update this. Yeah, I've been able to increase that to 3 millimeters thickness there because I changed the offset. Offset of -1 puts the thickness on the inside. Offset of +1 puts it on the outside, but still makes a bit of a mess of it there, as you can see. If you set it at 0, we've still got our clearance. Now I'm also going to tick high quality here. If I try ticking some of these other ones, you can see things go really weird. If that happens, just untick them. You can't always tick all 4 of these as well. It just depends upon the geometry of the shape. Now you could, if you like, 3D print that. I'm going to sort of stylize it a little bit further and smooth it off by adding a subsurf modifier. And what I need to do here is I need to change the view. I'm going to change it to 3. Now the bigger you make this number, the more faces you're going to end up with. We've already got 250,000 faces here. If you keep going with this, it does make the object nice and smooth, but as you can see I've gone above 1 million faces there, which is probably too much. So something like 3 is probably okay. Now this makes a really good job of smoothing off the outline of the object there. Now the exact geometry of this may still not be 3D printable. It might just be what happens in here. But I'm fairly confident that should be okay. If you find after running it through Netfab it's not okay, just try changing the ratio value. So you could change this to say 0.4 and that will give you a slightly different shape and maybe a better object to print. Now once you're happy with this, what you need to do is to export it. And I like to export it as a wavefront object, and I'm going to export it to the desktop, and I'm going to call it T-Light Holder, and then you must run this through Netfab. So I'll show you how to do that in a second. Oops, I haven't clicked export. I need to export that. Okay, so once the file's been saved to your desktop, if you start NetFab Basic up and go to Project and Open, and it's on the desktop, I want the tea light holder. Now you're probably going to find that there are some mistakes with this mesh, and the more sophisticated, more complicated you make the shape, the more mistakes there's going to be. The simpler you keep the profile, the more likely you are to get the object into a 3D printable format. So we just let NetFab load that up, and as you can see I get a warning red triangle there. I've just realized I made a mistake there. Before I save this, I should have deleted the candle bit in the middle. I'm not going to go back and do that now because it'll take me a little bit of time. Before I exported this, I should have deleted that cylinder in the middle because that's not an object that I want to 3D print. So to repair this mesh, I click on Repair and click on Update, and you can see what the problems are. There are some holes and the border edges, but not too many. I know it might look quite high, but 200, 800, it's not too bad. So NetFab will run through that, and it should repair these problems for you. So we'll just allow NetFab to do that. Should just take a few more seconds, and then when we click Update, you can see all these have been set back to 0, so we just click Apply the repair and remove the old part. And apart from that cylinder, which shouldn't be in the middle, that now should be a 3D printable mesh. So you just need to export that to the desktop as a wavefront object, and I'll just call it tea light holder, and I'll just save it on top of the original one. Now sometimes you might get a second window open up here, and you might have to fix it a second time, but that's not what happened in this case because this is a reasonably simple profile that I've used. Okay, so if I just go back to Fluid Designer, I should have deleted that cylinder there before I saved it, so X on the keyboard to delete it. This is the object that I should have deleted. Now if you try uploading this to Shapeways and you find that there is one or two of these webs that's just a little bit too thin to print, what you need to do is to open it up in Fluid Designer again, press the Tab key to go into oops, I haven't applied the modifiers here. Let me just go to Tools, Object Tools, convert it to a mesh just to apply the modifiers before I go into edit mode. That would have been done for you when you export it to NetFab. So if I just press Tab key on the keyboard, if I just press A to select all, if I just do Alt S on the keyboard, and if I just type in say 200, which if you look in the toolbar at the top equates to a fattening of 0.2, that would thicken it up. So if you do have a problem in NetFab, sorry, in Shapeways or wherever you try and print, if some of these are a little bit too thin, you can always fatten it up by going into edit mode and pressing Alt S, and that shouldn't change the shape in the center too much. So that's how you can create your tea light holder. As I said at the beginning, this one's a little bit more complicated to do, takes a little bit more time to make sure that the profile's okay and that it's 3D printable. Alright, but the principle's the same. Alright, thank you.